Welcome to Entrusted to Lead. I'm Danita Cummins, and this is episode 5 of our Clarity season, which is an 8-episode series on leadership clarity for complex seasons. Episode 1 explored why clarity is not the same as certainty, and episode 2 helped you name what's actually yours to carry. In episode 3, we talked about the discipline of subtraction, and episode 4 was all about leading from your actual authority, not more, not less, but what is genuinely yours. Today, we're building on all of that because you can subtract what doesn't belong and understand your actual authority and still lose your entire day to other people's urgency. We're talking about how to break that cycle and to start living from what's actually important instead of simply living from what's loud. So grab your cup of coffee and let's get started. Here's your scenario that you might recognize. You start your morning with the sense of what matters, and you know what needs your attention, and maybe you even have a quiet moment with God before the day begins. And then the text messages start, and the emails, and the phone calls, and the crisis your coworker created that somehow landed on your desk, and the family member who's in spiral yet again, and the volunteer coordinator who's asking you to fill a gap again. And by the end of the day, you've been busy and you've responded to dozens of things. You probably don't even remember what they were. And you feel exhausted, but you haven't actually moved forward on anything that really matters to you. You've just reacted all day long. Living reactively is when you're constantly responding to external demands instead of moving from internal clarity. It's when your day is controlled by other people's agendas. It's when you spend more time putting out fires than tending to the things that actually grow. And it's when you're so busy responding to what's urgent that you never get to what's important. And here's what makes it so hard to see. Reactive living feels productive. You are super busy and you're helping and you're responding to real needs. You're probably solving problems and people are actually really grateful because you're needed. But you're not actually moving forward. You're not setting direction for your life. You're not building anything. You're just trying to survive the day-to-day. I think that most of us have been there or are there, and we're exhausted at the end of the week because we poured ourselves out in every single direction, and we're unable to name a single thing that we did that actually aligned with what matters most. But friend, I'm here to say to you today, that is not faithfulness. That's a treadmill. And treadmills are exhausting. I'm running again now, so I have great respect for the treadmill, but it's a treadmill. Let me name what living this way actually takes from you, because I think we underestimate the cost of it. Like so many things in our life, we just navigate our life on autopilot, and we just pick up all the things that are on the floor, and we sort the socks, right? And we feed the cats. But this type of living steals your capacity to think clearly, because when you're always in response or reactive mode, you never have space to reflect or to pray or to ask God what He's actually asking of you in this season. And your life or your inner life gets so crowded, it just disappears because of everybody else's noise. And this mode also trains the people around you to create urgency. You can't see my hands right now, but to create urgency, right? We've all seen it. When you are consistently responding to whatever's the loudest, you teach people in your life that the way to get your attention is to make things feel like an emergency. I like to say we teach people how to treat us. And so your kids will learn it, your coworkers learn it, and your friends learn it. And it keeps you from preventing the patterns that are going to eventually exhaust you because you're so busy putting out fires that you never have time to sit and ask why the same fire keeps getting started. Right? And it exhausts you in a way that rest can't fix because reactive living is draining at a soul level because you're always on defense and you never get to choose and you're never leading your own life. And that wears you down to places where sleep can't really reach. You don't need a spa day. Okay? That's not going to solve your problem. And here's something else that the reactive cycle does that we don't talk enough about. It can become toxic. But not just for you, but for the people around you. My friend Sarma wrote me recently about this. He pointed out something that I think is really important. He said, when we live reactively, when we're overwhelmed and constantly in survival mode, we often pass that energy onto the people that are closest to us. Because short-tempered, impatient, harsh words, those things come flying out of our mouth. And it's not because we're bad people. It's just because we're depleted. And Sarma made a distinction that I thought was worth sharing here. He said, some of that toxicity is inherited. We have patterns that we absorb from watching how the people who lead us handle pressure. But some of it is acquired. It's habits that we pick up along the way because we never had a different model. So these inherited patterns are harder to recognize because they feel normal. They are just like, this is how things are done, right? But the acquired ones, the ones that we pick up from exhausting environments, those are easier to release once we see them clearly. And breaking this reactive cycle is often the first step toward releasing both things. Because when you are no longer living in constant survival mode, you can finally see the patterns you've been repeating, and you get to choose something different, friend, which is absolute power. So, how do you break the cycle? I'm going to give you 3 shifts. They're not productivity hacks, they're posture changes, which are ways that you can reorient how you move throughout the day. Okay? Shift number 1 is from responding to everything to protecting what matters. The first shift is recognizing that you can't respond to everything, and trying to will keep you reactive forever. Living intentionally requires you to protect your time and your energy for what actually matters, even when it means disappointing people who want your immediate attention. And this might look like not checking your phone first thing in the morning and giving yourself 1 full hour to God or to your own clarity before the world starts making demands. It might be like telling someone, I can't respond to that right now, but I'll get back to you by Thursday. And it might look like stepping back from a commitment that keeps you in a constant reaction mode. I know this feels uncomfortable because even as I'm talking, I'm thinking through the scenarios in my current life right now where I'm thinking maybe I need a little bit better posture in my life. But we have been taught that good people are always available. They're always responsive, always ready to help. We're watching our inbox like a catcher's mitt. We're like, email out, email in, email out, right? We're always responsive. We're always ready to help. But that is not sustainable, friend. That's exhausting. And it's not what God asks of us, because he asks us for faithfulness to what is ours, not being available to everyone and everything in the world. Shift number 2 is we have to shift from managing crisis to addressing patterns. This second shift is moving from constantly managing individual crisis to honestly looking at the patterns underneath them. Reactive living puts out fires. Intentional living asks, why do these fires keep starting, right? Have you ever been in a room or a meeting or a series of meetings, you're working on a team or project, and you're like, why do we keep going around the same mountain? Someone has to take a step back and look objectively and ask the question, why does this keep happening? So here's an example. I know someone who is constantly scrambling on Sunday mornings. Every single week, it was chaos. Kids aren't ready. There's arguments about who's wearing what. Everybody's running late, arriving at church. Everyone seems stressed and irritated every single week. That could be our family. I'm just saying. But for this one, we'll say it's a hypothetical family. And every week, they managed the crisis. They powered through. They got everybody there, even if they were yelling in the minivan. But it wasn't until they stopped and said, wait, what is the pattern here? That anything actually changed. The answer was simple. Nothing was prepared the night before. Clothes, bags, breakfast, all of it was being figured out in real time on the most pressured morning of the week. So they made one change. Saturday night became prep night. 30 minutes of laying things out, packing bags, making decisions in advance. And the Sunday morning chaos, it didn't disappear entirely because life always happens. But it goes from being this weekly crisis to a manageable morning because they had addressed the pattern instead of just surviving in the moment. And that's a simple example, right? But the principle scales to whatever use case you would like to apply. Whatever area of your life that keeps producing the same crisis, the same overwhelm, the same last-minute scramble or conflict, there's a pattern underneath, friend. And that pattern is what needs your attention, not just the latest fire. And shift number 3 is we have to shift from letting urgency set our agenda to leading from our actual priorities. I think this is the deepest and most impactful shift because it is the one that directly connects to everything we've been talking about this season. Because just because something feels urgent doesn't mean it's important. And just because someone wants your immediate attention doesn't mean they need it. Unless they're little people, right? That's a different conversation. But intentional living requires you to define what's actually important. And then you structure your life around that, even when urgent things are screaming for attention. And this means knowing your priorities and your values, and not in this vague aspirational sense with a word or a phrase, but concretely. Like, what are the 3 things this season that genuinely need my attention? What about my health? What about my relationship with God? What about my kids during this particular chapter? What about my own healing? Whatever it is. And then you have to be willing to organize your days around those things, even when other demands are louder. I know it's hard. It's like blocking out all the noise and really focusing on the things that are the most important to you in this season. But here's the hard truth. You are never going to break the reactive cycle unless you are willing to disappoint someone. Because there will always be a person who wants your immediate attention, or who thinks their issue is the most important thing happening. And maybe someone who expects you to drop everything. And if you say yes to all of it, then you will stay reactive forever. Breaking the cycle requires the courage to say kindly, but clearly, I know this feels urgent to you, but it's not what I'm called to right now. That's not selfish. That's stewardship. It is the same principle we've been exploring all season. By knowing what's yours, releasing what isn't, and trusting God with the gap. You have to trust God with the gap, friend. Jesus was the most intentional person who ever lived. He didn't heal every sick person, and he did not respond to every request, right? He said no to the crowds when he needed to pray, and he left towns where people wanted him to stay. But why did he do that? Because he was clear about what the Father had given him to do, and he refused to let urgency pull him away from it. There's a great suffering in the world. I do know that. And it's easy to get consumed by the suffering, but you have to really focus and lean in with intention, or you can get swept up by the storm. There's a moment in Mark 1 that I think about often. It says that early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus went off to a solitary place to pray. And when his disciples found him, they said, "Everyone is looking for you." Everyone. The needs are real, and the urgency was legitimate, and people wanted him, right? They wanted Jesus. And they had real problems. There was real suffering. And Jesus said, "Let us go somewhere else." He chose his mission over their urgency, and not because he didn't care about them, not because he didn't love them with his whole heart and his whole body, his whole soul, but because he was clear about what was his. And that clarity gave him the freedom to say no to what wasn't. So here's what I want you to do this week. I want you to identify one recurring reactive pattern in your life. That sounds like a mouthful. I know. I just said it. I was like, whoa, that's a lot. But pick one area where you're constantly putting out the same fire, or you're responding to the same kind of urgency. And then I want you to ask, what is the pattern underneath this? What boundary could I set? What priorities need to come first? And then try something different, even if it's small. Even if people push back a little bit, that's okay. Tension is fine. Tension is okay. As we get older and as leaders and we grow in our own emotional intelligence, we really have to learn how to stay in the tension and not eject or reject. Because the only way to break the reactive cycle is to stop feeding it. I mean, that's the bottom line. And the only way to start living intentionally is to choose one moment at a time what's actually important over what is simply loud. So before you go, if you want to know what you bring to the table when you're leading from a clear, honest place, I created a quiz called What is Your Leadership Superpower? It only takes a couple of minutes, and you find the link in today's show notes. Only here. You won't find it anywhere else. And so I'd love for you to take it and let me know your thoughts. This is Entrusted to Lead. I am Danita Cummins. You are my greatest treasure other than my family and my faith. And I thank you for being here today. The next episode in the Clarity season, we are going to be talking about what happens when your role is clear but the path forward isn't. And how are you supposed to lead faithfully when you know what you're responsible for, but you have no idea how it's going to unfold? Friend, that has been my life for the last year. So if you want a little behind the scenes of what it's like to be a startup tech CEO, I am more than happy to share the down and dirty details of how you move forward with faith when you only can see the next right step in front of you. I'm super excited about this next episode. I hope you join me. And as always, friend, keep showing up every day, even when it hurts, because you matter. All right. Have an amazing day. I'll see you later. Bye.